Damiano Rossi ruled fear the way other men ruled businesses. His name closed mouths, his money erased problems, his enemies disappeared. Yet every night, when his car rolled through the iron gates of his estate, none of that power followed him inside. The engine of his black sedan went silent in the driveway, but the ache in his chest didn't. Damiano stayed seated for a moment, jaw tight, fingers still on the wheel, bracing himself before stepping into a house that had stopped feeling alive 2 years ago. The mansion was immaculate, polished marble, soft lights, absolute silence. Upstairs slept his son. Nico Rossi had once filled these halls with laughter. Then, one night, blood and gunfire stole his mother, and with her, his voice. Since that moment, the boy hadn't spoken a single word. Damiano tried everything. Specialists flown in from Europe, private clinics no one else could afford, promises made behind closed doors. Nothing reached the child. Then, quietly, someone unexpected entered his home. A maid. No credentials, no demands, just steady hands, patience, and a warmth that didn't ask for permission. And one evening, when Damiano walked into his bedroom and saw something he wasn't meant to see, the air left his lungs. His instincts exploded. In that instant, he nearly destroyed the only miracle money couldn't buy. If you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to subscribe and give this video a like. It really helps support the channel. We'd also love to hear from you. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments. Your support means a lot, and we truly value our community. The mansion had learned how to hold its breath. Every corridor, every marble step, every chandelier-lit hall seemed to exist in a state of quiet restraint, as if sound itself had been forbidden. Servants moved softly. Doors closed without a click. Even the clocks had been replaced with silent ones, their hands gliding without a tick. At the center of that silence was Nico Rossi. He was 5 years old now, small for his age, with pale blonde hair that fell into his eyes and a gaze far too old for a child. He sat most days by the tall bedroom window on the second floor, legs tucked beneath him, watching the world outside as if it belonged to someone else. He didn't speak, he didn't cry, he didn't ask questions. He simply watched. 2 years earlier, Nico had been a different child. Loud, curious, the kind who ran through hallways barefoot, laughing as his mother chased him, pretending she couldn't catch him. His laughter had once echoed through the house, bright enough to soften even Damiano Rossi's hardened heart. Then came the night that stole everything. Gunfire shattered the quiet just after midnight. Nico had been half asleep when his bedroom door flew open and his mother rushed in, her face pale with terror. She scooped him into her arms, whispering his name again and again as they ran. He remembered the smell of her perfume, the tightness of her grip, the sound of shouting below. They didn't make it far. Nico remembered the deafening crack of a gunshot, the sudden weight as his mother collapsed, shielding him with her body. Warmth soaked into his pajamas. Her voice called his name one last time, then disappeared forever. By the time Damiano reached them, it was already over. From that night on, Nico's world went silent. Doctors came first, the best money could buy. They poked and prodded, ran scans, whispered diagnoses in hushed tones. Acute trauma, psychological shutdown, selective mutism. Each offered hope wrapped in professional caution, each left with their heads bowed. Then came therapists, gentle voices, colorful toys, endless questions Nico never answered. Some stayed patient, others grew frustrated. One by one, they all failed. Damiano sent Nico overseas, private clinics hidden in mountains and on distant shores, experimental treatments that promised miracles. He paid without hesitation, signed papers without reading them, flew in specialists at a moment's notice. Nothing worked. Nico never spoke. As months turned into years, the mansion changed. What had once been a home became a mausoleum,
Laughter vanished. Music was banned. Even Damiano's men lowered their voices when they entered, as if afraid to disturb the ghost of the boy Nico used to be. Damiano watched his son from a distance, knowing how to reach him. The same hands that had built an empire, that had ended lives without trembling, couldn't bring themselves to touch the child. Control had always been Damiano's weapon, but here it was useless. At night, Nico slept curled on his side, clutching a worn blanket that still smelled faintly of his mother. Sometimes his eyes opened suddenly, wide and terrified, as if he were reliving that night all over again. But he never screamed, never called out. Silence was his shield. And the mansion, vast, luxurious, impenetrable, became his prison. Damiano stood at the edge of it all, surrounded by wealth and power, knowing with crushing certainty that he had conquered everything except the one thing that mattered: his son's voice.
Adriana Russo arrived on a rainy morning, carrying nothing but a small canvas bag and a quiet determination that went unnoticed by almost everyone. She was younger than most of the staff expected, with dark hair pulled back neatly and eyes that observed more than they spoke. No sharp heels clicked across the marble floors when she walked. No perfume lingered in her wake. She wore plain shoes, a simple uniform, and yellow rubber gloves folded carefully in her bag, as if they mattered. The housekeeper barely looked up when Adriana was introduced. Neither did the butler. A few maids exchanged glances that said everything. Another one, and she won't last. They had seen many like her come and go. Adriana was assigned light duties at first, dusting unused rooms, polishing furniture no one touched anymore. The mansion felt cold to her, not in temperature, but in spirit. It was a beautiful place, meticulously kept, yet drained of warmth, as though joy had been evicted long ago. No one told her much about the boy. Only fragments slipped through in whispers. Don't make noise upstairs. Don't enter the west wing. If you see the child, don't speak unless spoken to. And above all, don't expect anything. Damiano Rossi passed her once in the hallway that first day. He didn't slow down, didn't look at her face. His presence alone bent the air. Tall, shoply dressed, eyes heavy with something darker than anger. Adriana lowered her gaze instinctively, not from fear, but from respect for grief she recognized without understanding. To him, she was invisible, just another name on a payroll, another disposable attempt at normalcy. It was late afternoon when Adriana first saw Nico. She was wiping down a low table near the staircase when she noticed a small figure sitting on the steps, half hidden by the banister. A blond boy, barefoot, clutching a small toy car in one hand. He wasn't playing with it, just holding it, staring at nothing in particular. Adriana froze. She remembered the warnings: don't engage, don't speak. So she didn't. She finished her tasks slowly, deliberately, letting her movements stay soft and unthreatening. When she stood to leave, she noticed the car roll gently down one step and stop near her foot. Nico had dropped it. Adriana didn't rush to hand it back. She crouched instead, picked it up, and placed it carefully on the step between them, close enough for him to reach, far enough that he didn't feel crowded. Then she waited. Nico stared at the toy, then at her hands, then at her face. His eyes were wide, unreadable, like someone watching from behind glass. Adriana smiled, but only with her eyes. She stood up without a word and walked away. That night, Nico pushed the toy car on the step. Just once. No one noticed. No one except the silent walls. Over the next few days, Adriana found reasons to work near where Nico spent time. She never spoke to him, never asked questions. She hummed softly while dusting. She sat on the floor once to clean a low shelf, turning her back slightly so he wouldn't feel watched. Once, she wore the yellow gloves and pretended to inspect her own arm, tapping it lightly as if checking a heartbeat. She didn't look at Nico while she did it, but Nico looked at her. From the doorway, Damiano observed it all without realizing it mattered.
To him, Adriana was still just a maid, another presence that would fade away like the rest. He didn't see the way Nico leaned forward, didn't see the way his fingers tightened around the toy, didn't see the smallest crack forming in the silence. But something had shifted, and for the first time in 2 years, the mansion felt, just barely, awake. It happened on a quiet afternoon, when the mansion was wrapped in its usual hush, the kind that made even sunlight feel careful as it spilled across the floors. Adriana was in the sitting room, kneeling beside a low cabinet, sorting cleaning supplies with slow, deliberate movements. She wore her yellow gloves, rolling one wrist as if adjusting an invisible cuff. She hadn't noticed at first that she was no longer alone. Nico stood in the doorway. He watched her for a long time, his small fingers curled around the edge of the doorframe. Adriana sensed him the way one senses a change in air. She didn't turn immediately. She kept doing what she was doing, giving him time, giving him space. Then, something extraordinary happened. Nico took a step forward. Just one. The sound of his bare foot against the floor was soft, but it landed in the room like a thunderclap. Adriana's hands stilled. She didn't look up. She waited. Another step. Nico walked toward her until he stood only an arm's length away. He hesitated, then reached into the pocket of his pajamas and pulled out a small plastic toy, bright blue with white tubing coiled neatly around it. A toy stethoscope. Adriana's breath caught, though her face remained calm. Slowly, carefully, she turned to face him. Nico held the stethoscope out, his hand trembling slightly, his eyes locked on hers. For 2 years, Nico had not spoken. For 2 years, he had not initiated anything. Adriana didn't rush him. She extended her gloved hand, letting him place the toy into her palm. Then, with extraordinary seriousness, she slipped the earpieces into her ears and tapped the chest piece like a real doctor would. She pressed it against her own heart. Thump, thump. She widened her eyes in mock surprise and nodded gravely, as if confirming something very important. Then she gently offered the stethoscope back to him and tapped her chest again, inviting him to try. Nico hesitated. The room held its breath. Then, slowly, he lifted the stethoscope and pressed it against Adriana's chest. His brow furrowed in concentration. He leaned in closer, listening with an intensity far beyond his years. And then, a smile. It started small, uncertain, like his face was remembering how to do it, but it grew. Soft, real. The first smile anyone had seen from Nico Rossi in 2 long years. Adriana's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. She placed a hand over her heart and mouthed, "Thank you." Nico watched her lips move. He didn't speak, but his smile stayed. From the hallway, the head housekeeper stopped dead in her tracks. A maid dropped a tray. Someone gasped. No one dared move. They were witnessing something none of them believed possible. Nico handed Adriana the stethoscope again, this time pressing it against her arm, her shoulder, her gloved hand, as if checking her everywhere. Adriana played along, pretending to wince, then nodding with approval like a patient being declared healthy. A soft sound escaped Nico's throat. Not a word, not a cry, but a sound. Adriana froze. So did everyone else. Nico's eyes widened as if he'd surprised himself. His hand flew to his mouth, panic flickering across his face, as though he'd broken an unspoken rule. Adriana shook her head gently and placed her gloved finger over her lips, not to silence him, but to tell him it was safe. "It's okay," she whispered. Nico didn't respond, but he didn't run away either. When Damiano arrived home that evening, the staff met him with faces pale and voices shaking. Words tumbled over each other, disbelief thick in every sentence. The boy, he smiled. He played with the maid. Damiano dismissed it as exaggeration. Hope was dangerous. He had learned that the hard way. But from the doorway of the sitting room, he saw it for himself. His son sitting on the floor, a toy stethoscope in his hand, and a smile, small, fragile, miraculous, on Nico Rossi's face. Damiano Rossi stood frozen, and for the first time in years, something inside his chest broke open.
Damiano did not enter the room. He stood in the shadowed corridor, one hand braced against the cold marble wall, his presence unnoticed as he watched through the narrow opening of the door. From where he stood, the light from the sitting room spilled out like something alive, touching the edges of a space that had been dark for far too long. Nico was on the floor, not rigid, not withdrawn, not staring through people as if they were ghosts. He was playing. Damiano's fingers tightened slowly, painfully, as if his body didn't know what to do with the sight in front of him. Adriana sat cross-legged a short distance away, her yellow gloves bright against the dark rug, her posture relaxed, almost casual. She wasn't forcing anything, she wasn't coaxing or pleading, she simply existed near her son, present in a way no doctor or specialist ever had. Nico lifted the toy stethoscope again, pressed it to Adriana's arm, then his own chest. He listened, brow furrowed in concentration, then glanced up at her as if waiting for approval. Adriana smiled, not wide, not dramatic, just enough. Something twisted in Damiano's chest. For a brief, dangerous second, hope tried to rise. He crushed it immediately. Hope had betrayed him too many times. Hope was what had driven him to spend millions, to fly Nico across oceans, to sit through empty promises and clinical reassurances while his son retreated further into silence. Hope was weakness, and weakness got people killed. Damiano's gaze hardened as he studied Adriana more closely. The way she leaned toward Nico, the way her voice softened when she spoke to him, the way his son, looked at her. Too comfortable. Too close. A flicker of unease slid into his thoughts, thin and sharp as a blade. He didn't like not understanding what was happening under his roof. He didn't like anything he couldn't control. And he especially didn't like the idea that some quiet maid had succeeded, where he, with all his power and wealth, had failed. His jaw tightened. What was she doing exactly? Damiano had built an empire by reading people, by spotting lies in the smallest gestures, by trusting his instincts when something felt off. And now, standing in the shadows, he felt that old instinct stirring, not as clarity, but as fear. Fear dressed up as suspicion. Fear that Nico's fragile progress could be shattered just as quickly as it had appeared. Fear that Adriana's presence was a variable he couldn't predict. Fear that if this was taken away, his son might disappear forever. Nico made another soft sound, barely audible, and Adriana froze for a heartbeat before relaxing again. She didn't react like someone chasing a breakthrough. She didn't grab at the moment or demand more. She let it pass naturally, as if trusting it would come again. Damiano's nails bit into his palm. That trust terrified him. He took a step back, retreating deeper into the corridor before anyone could sense him there. His reflection stared back at him from the polished surface of a nearby mirror. A powerful man in a tailored suit, eyes dark, expression carved from stone. He barely recognized himself. Anger rose, hot and familiar, wrapping around the fear until it felt manageable. Anger he knew how to wield. Anger kept order. Anger kept him safe. He told himself this was temporary, that Adriana was just another employee, that miracles didn't exist. Yet, as he turned away, Nico's soft, almost smile burned into his mind like a brand, and Damiano Rossi realized something he refused to name. He was afraid. Afraid to believe. Afraid to hope. Afraid that the one thing bringing his son back to life could be taken away, or worse, could betray him. So he watched from the shadows, and he waited. The house was unusually quiet that evening. Not the hollow silence Damiano had grown used to, but something softer, threaded with faint sounds that made his pulse uneasy. He climbed the stairs without summoning anyone, his footsteps slow, deliberate, the way they were when he was preparing for bad news. The door to his bedroom was ajar. Light spilled out. Damiano stopped. He heard Adriana's voice first, low, gentle, almost a whisper. Not the voice of a servant reporting her duties, not the voice of someone afraid. It was intimate in a way that made something sharp twist in his chest. He pushed the door open. The sight struck him like a gunshot. Nico was sitting on the edge of the bed. His shoes were off. His small hands were resting in Adriana's gloved ones. She was kneeling in front of him, close enough that their foreheads nearly touched. The toy stethoscope lay forgotten beside them. Adriana lifted Nico's hand and pressed it against her chest, right over her heart. She closed her eyes for a moment, breathing slowly, as if guiding him through something private, something Damiano did not understand. From where he stood, it looked wrong. Too close, too personal, too much like possession. Damiano's world narrowed. His vision tunneled, blood roaring in his ears as old instincts, brutal, unforgiving, surged to the surface. In his world, closeness was a weapon. Touch was control. No one touched what belonged to him. No one. "What are you doing?" His voice cracked through the room like thunder. Adriana flinched violently. Nico startled, his eyes flying wide, his hands slipping from hers. Fear rushed back into his face so fast it was like watching glass shatter in reverse. Damiano stepped forward. Each stride was heavy, unstoppable. His expression was carved from fury, every line of it shaped by years of violence and loss. "Get away from him," he snarled. Adriana stood immediately, shaking her head, hands raised instinctively. "Sir, I was just—" "Enough." The word was sharp enough to cut. Nico slid backward on the bed, curling in on himself, his breathing speeding up. His eyes darted between them, confusion and terror flooding back into a space that had only just begun to heal. Damiano didn't see that. All he saw was red. He crossed the room in 2 strides and grabbed Adriana's wrist, yanking her away from the bed. She gasped, nearly losing her balance as the yellow glove slid halfway down her hand. "You think I don't see what you're trying to do?" he growled, his grip tightening. "You think I brought you into this house to play games with my son?" "Sir, please," Adriana said, her voice breaking. "I was just—" "Enough." Damiano laughed, cold and humorless. "I have buried liars. I have watched men beg for mercy while swearing innocence. Don't insult me." Nico let out a sound then, not a word, but a broken, panicked cry that tore through the room. Damiano froze for half a second, but rage was louder than reason. "Leave," he snapped, pointing toward the door. "Now, before I forget myself." Adriana looked past him, to Nico, her eyes filled with tears she didn't wipe away. "I would never hurt him, never." Damiano turned his back on her. Security appeared almost instantly, drawn by the raised voice. Adriana didn't resist as they guided her toward the door. She didn't beg, she didn't argue. She only kept looking at Nico. Nico slid off the bed and ran after her, grabbing at her sleeve, his small hands trembling. His mouth opened, sound trapped behind fear and desperation. "Get him away," Damiano ordered harshly. Strong arms lifted Nico back as his body stiffened, silent sobs shaking him. The door closed. The room fell deathly still. Damiano stood alone, chest heaving, anger slowly cooling into something heavier, something darker.
Behind him, Nico sank to the floor, retreating inward, the fragile door Adriana had opened slamming shut once more. And for the first time that night, Damiano Rossi felt something far worse than rage. He felt the cold touch of regret. Adriana was stopped at the foot of the servants' staircase. 2 guards blocked her path, their expressions stiff with discomfort. Word had already spread through the mansion with the speed of fear. When Damiano Rossi was angry, walls listened. She didn't struggle when they escorted her into the small sitting room near the kitchen. Her yellow gloves were folded neatly in her hands, knuckles white from gripping them too tightly. Her head was bowed, not in guilt, but in quiet dread, for Nico. Damiano entered minutes later. The air changed the moment he stepped inside. He dismissed the guards with a flick of his hand and shut the door himself. The click of the lock echoed like a verdict. "Speak," he said coldly. Adriana lifted her eyes. They were red but steady. "I was helping him," she said softly. "He wanted to feel a heartbeat. He was scared. I showed him mine so he wouldn't feel alone." Damiano's jaw tightened. "You think I'm a fool?" he snapped. "Do you have any idea how many people would use my son to get close to me?" "I don't care about you," Adriana said, the words escaping before fear could stop them. Then she inhaled sharply. "I care about him." The silence that followed was suffocating. Damiano turned away, pacing like a caged animal. Control, his lifelong weapon, was slipping, and nothing terrified him more than that. "You are dismissed," he said at last, voice flat. "You will leave this house by morning." Adriana's breath hitched. "Please," she whispered, "don't do this to him. He was opening up. You saw—" "I saw enough," Damiano cut in. "This conversation is over." Upstairs, something shattered. A sound tore through the mansion, not a word, not a scream, but raw anguish. Nico's cry ripped through the halls like a wound splitting open. Damiano spun around. He ran. The bedroom door was open. Nico was on the floor, curled into himself, fists pressed against his head as if trying to block out the world. Furniture had been knocked over. The toy stethoscope lay broken in 2 near the bed. He was sobbing, not quietly, not silently. His entire body convulsed with it. Damiano dropped to his knees in front of him, reaching out, but Nico recoiled violently, pressing himself into the corner. His eyes were wild, unfocused, full of terror that cut deeper than any knife. "Nico," Damiano said urgently, "Papa's here." The word meant nothing. Nico rocked back and forth, a hoarse, broken sound escaping his throat again and again. His mouth opened as if trying to speak, but nothing came, only pain. Damiano looked around desperately. "Get Adriana," he barked to the servants frozen in the doorway. "Now!" No one moved. "She's gone, sir," someone whispered. "You told her to leave." The truth hit him like a physical blow. Damiano turned back to his son, but it was too late. Nico's sobs slowly strangled themselves into nothing. His breathing steadied, then slowed. His eyes dulled. The light went out. He withdrew into himself with terrifying speed, retreating deeper than before. When Damiano touched his shoulder, Nico didn't react. When he spoke, Nico didn't hear. The silence returned. But it was different now. Heavier, colder, permanent. Hours passed. The mansion stood frozen, as if afraid to breathe. Damiano sat on the floor beside Nico's bed long after night fell, his back against the wall, his hands stained with helplessness. He had faced death without blinking, ordered executions without remorse, built an empire on fear, but nothing had ever destroyed him like the sight of his son breaking because of him. And for the first time in his life, Damiano Rossi understood the most dangerous truth of all. His rage had done what enemies never could. It had taken his son away from him.
The silence lasted 3 days. 3 days where Nico did not leave his room. 3 days where food was left untouched on silver trays. 3 days where no sound came from behind the closed door except the faint hum of the security system and the ticking of time passing without mercy. Damiano did not sleep. He sat in his study, surrounded by screens, papers, and reports he could not read. His empire continued to move without him, orders carried out, money transferred, enemies contained, but none of it mattered. His world had shrunk to one closed door on the second floor. On the 4th night, Raymond came in without knocking. The old man's face was pale, his jaw tight with something close to fear. "Sir," he said carefully, "there's something you need to see." Damiano didn't answer. He gestured once. The monitors flickered to life. Raymond cued the footage from inside the mansion, time-stamped, silent, merciless. Damiano watched with detached irritation at first, his arms crossed, his mind elsewhere. Then he saw the bedroom. He leaned forward. The image showed Adriana kneeling in front of Nico, her movements slow and deliberate. No secrecy, no coercion, just patience. Nico reached out on his own, hesitant fingers brushing the stethoscope, then her glove. Damiano's breath hitched. The angle shifted, audio crackled faintly as Adriana spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Can you feel it?" she said gently, guiding Nico's hand to her chest. "That's my heart. It beats fast when I'm scared, and slow when I'm calm." Nico copied her breathing. In the footage, his shoulders lowered, his eyes softened. For a brief, fragile moment, he smiled. Damiano's chest tightened painfully. Then the door burst open. His own image filled the screen, tall, imposing, rage already carved into his face. He saw himself grab her wrist, saw Nico flinch, saw the moment everything shattered. The video ended. The room was suffocatingly quiet. Damiano didn't move. Minutes passed, maybe longer. Raymond stood silently, knowing better than to speak. "I thought she was manipulating him," Damiano said at last, his voice hollow. "Using weakness." Raymond swallowed. "She was teaching him safety, sir." Damiano laughed once, short, broken. "I've crushed men for less." The weight of realization settled like a tombstone on his chest. He had been wrong. Not a calculated mistake, not a business error he could erase with money or blood. A human one. He replayed the footage again and again. Each time it hurt more. Each time he noticed something new. The way Adriana never forced Nico. The way she waited. The way she never looked at the cameras, never tried to hide. She wasn't trying to get close to him. She was saving his son. Damiano stood so suddenly the chair crashed backward. He pressed his palms against the desk, shoulders shaking. "I did this," he whispered. Raymond hesitated. "Sir, I broke him," Damiano said louder now, his voice cracked. "He was coming back, and I ripped it away." The memory of Nico's empty eyes flooded him, the way his son had recoiled from his touch, the silence, deeper, colder than ever. For the first time since his wife died, Damiano felt truly unarmed. No gun could fix this, no threat could undo it, no fortune could buy forgiveness from a child who no longer believed the world was safe. He turned toward the door. "Find her," he ordered hoarsely. "I don't care where she went. I don't care what it costs." Raymond nodded immediately. "Yes, sir." Damiano stopped, gripping the doorframe as if the house itself might collapse. "And Raymond,
he added quietly, without turning back. "If I've destroyed the only person who could save my son," his voice failed him, "then I deserve whatever comes next." The door closed behind him. Upstairs, behind a locked door, a little boy sat alone in the dark, silent once more, while a powerful man finally understood that guilt was the one enemy he could not command to kneel.
Damiano stood outside Nico's bedroom door for a long time before knocking. Not because he was afraid of what he might hear, but because he was afraid of hearing nothing at all. When he finally pushed the door open, the room was dim, curtains drawn, toys untouched. Nico sat on the floor with his back against the bed, knees pulled to his chest, eyes fixed on a spot that wasn't there. He didn't look up. Damiano closed the door behind him and stayed where he was. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't give an order. He didn't step closer. "I'm sorry," he said. The words felt foreign in his mouth, fragile and unarmed. Nico didn't react. Damiano swallowed hard and slowly lowered himself to the floor, several feet away, so he wouldn't tower over him. The powerful man who once ruled rooms now sat quietly, hands resting open on his knees. "I was wrong," he continued, his voice rough. "I thought I was protecting you, but I hurt you instead." Silence answered him. Damiano forced himself to keep going. "Adriana didn't do anything bad. She was helping you, and I took her away because I was afraid." That word, afraid, cost him everything to say. "I know I don't say this well. I don't know how to fix things with money or threats anymore. I just want my son back." His voice broke. "I miss you." Something shifted. Nico's fingers twitched against the fabric of his pants. His breathing changed, unsteady now, uneven, as if something long buried was pushing upward, desperate for air. Damiano didn't move. He waited. A small sound escaped Nico's throat. Not a cry, not silence. A sound. Damiano's vision blurred with tears. Nico's lips trembled. His chest rose sharply as if he were drowning. Then, "Pa." The word barely existed, broken, fragile, but real. Damiano's world collapsed. He lunged forward on instinct, then stopped himself, freezing in place, terrified of breaking the moment. His hands shook violently as tears spilled freely down his face. Yes, I'm here." Nico's face crumbled. Years of fear, confusion, and pain surged out all at once. He sobbed, not silently, not trapped, but openly, gasping and shaking as if the sound itself hurt. Damiano crossed the distance and pulled his son into his arms. This time, Nico didn't pull away. He clutched Damiano's shirt with desperate strength, burying his face against his chest, crying like the little boy he had never been allowed to be. "I've got you," Damiano whispered over and over, rocking him gently. "I've got you. I won't leave. I promise." His knees buckled as the weight of everything crashed down on him. Guilt, relief, gratitude, terror at how close he'd come to losing this forever. He sank to the floor with Nico in his arms, holding him as if the world might steal him again if he loosened his grip. Outside the door, servants wept silently. Raymond turned away, his eyes wet. Inside the room, a single word echoed louder than any gunshot ever had. "Papa." And in that sound, the silence finally broke, not with force, not with power, but with love that had learned how to kneel. Adriana returned quietly. No announcement, no entourage, just the soft sound of the gate opening and her familiar footsteps crossing the marble floor, yellow gloves folded neatly in her hands, as if she were afraid even the color might offend him now. Damiano met her in the main hall. The man who once made enemies tremble didn't let her bow, didn't let her speak first. He walked toward her slowly, eyes lowered, shoulders heavy with something far greater than authority.
Then he did the unthinkable. He knelt. Not in ceremony, not for drama, but because his legs no longer trusted themselves to stand. "I was wrong," he said, voice steady but stripped bare. "About you, about him, about everything." Adriana froze, shock flickering across her face. "Sir, you don't have to—" "Yes," he said gently. "I do." He looked up at her, eyes raw, unguarded. "You gave my son something I couldn't buy, and I almost destroyed it." Silence filled the hall, not the suffocating kind that once lived here, but a quiet that allowed truth to breathe. "I don't know how to be this man yet," Damiano continued, "but I want to learn, if you'll stay. Not because I command it, but because you choose to." Adriana's eyes softened. "I never came for the money. I came because he needed someone who wouldn't be afraid of his silence." Damiano nodded. "Neither am I anymore." When Nico saw her later that day, he didn't hide. He stepped forward, small, hesitant, brave in a way no grown man in the room had ever been. Adriana knelt to his level, smiling but not reaching for him. "Hello, doctor," she said softly. Nico hesitated, then lifted the toy stethoscope and placed it around her neck. Damiano's breath caught. No guards moved, no orders were spoken. The mansion, once a fortress of fear, stood still, as if afraid to disturb the fragile miracle unfolding inside it. From that day on, things changed. Damiano stopped watching from behind doors. He sat on the floor, he listened, he waited. When Nico stumbled over words, Damiano didn't correct him. When fear crept back in, he didn't raise his voice. Trust replaced fear, slowly, awkwardly, but real. The empire still existed. The streets still whispered his name with caution, but inside the walls of his home, power no longer ruled. Love did. One evening, as Nico slept peacefully between them during story time, Adriana quietly rose to leave. Damiano stopped her with a hand over his heart. "Thank you," he said, not as a boss, but as a father whose world had been returned to him piece by fragile piece. Adriana smiled. "He cured himself," she replied. "He just needed someone to believe he could." Damiano watched his son breathe, and for the first time in years, the richest man in the city understood the truth. The cure money couldn't buy wasn't silence broken, it was fear released. And in letting go of control, he had finally learned how to hold his son. If this story moved you, take a second to like and share it with someone who believes money can fix everything, except the heart. Subscribe and turn on notifications for more powerful stories where healing comes from the most unexpected places.